10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pinche Gringo show. So glad to be with you today. We have a great show for you, so I hope you stick around with us. And we're doing something new this week. So if you have a comment about something, write it in the comments section of Facebook Live or YouTube. And if we have a moment during the show, we will talk about it. It'd be really exciting to hear from you. But let's get right into it. With the world seeming like it's collapsing, like the recent explosion in Lebanon or the growing health crisis, the internet has gone nuts over a tomato with scars that look like the face of Hall of Fame basketball player Larry Bird. Do you see it? Kind of looks like it. No? But this week, Mexico has been captivated also by a story of heroism, bravery, and ultimately shame. So just in case the video is not that clear, the guy gets on a small bus in what we in Mexico call a combi, and in his attempt to rob it, he gets the shit kicked out of him by the passengers. But that's not the only astonishing thing that happened. Check out the grand finale. That's right. They kick him out, they leave him naked on the sidewalk, and they drive away. And of course, the social media universe was in disarray, popping out memes like this: the soft caress of the state of Mexico. So the lesson here, kids, don't mess with the state of Mexico. Unless you're from the suburb of Satélite or Toluca, that might be a different story, but don't mess with the state of Mexico. But let's talk about more important things like the coronavirus, or what marketing executives at Modelo would rather call it, the Dos Equis virus. Anyone going to Corona Sunsets this year? Anyone? But with the continued growth of cases in Mexico City, residents have been taking it very seriously and staying home. Well, I guess it depends on what home that is. This is a scene from the toll booth entering Mexico City on the weekend getaway of Cuernavaca on Sunday night, because a tropical forest is the perfect place to stay away from a virus. But thousands of residents got into their cars last weekend and headed out of the city in which is normal summer vacation time, causing traffic jams on both Friday and Sunday that haven't been seen since the pandemic picked up in early April. So for those of you watching from outside of Mexico, you must know we have amazing vacation spots only 1 to 2 hours away where hundreds of thousands of people go to almost every single weekend. Places like, as I mentioned, Cuernavaca, which means eternal spring. Although, due to the global warming, I think that it's not really true anymore. I mean, 32 degrees is summer weather, not spring weather. But if you want something cooler with a big man-made lake, you can head to the Valley of Gold, or in other words, the land of people who have a lot of gold saved in a Swiss bank account. Yes, this place is called Valle de Bravo, a place where the rich play and where you decide to go out for a few drinks and then you end up watching a group of 16-year-old juniors dressed in polo shirts serenading a bottle of champagne with a sparkler in it shouting, "Hey, hey, hey, hey," and "No mames way, no mames way." But maybe you may want to stay a little closer in the city and hit up La Marquesa, where you really don't know what's in that green chorizo. It's rabbits. It's rabbits. But it looks and tastes amazing. Or you can go ahead to a beautiful Mexico City destination called Desierto de los Leones, where actually it's not a desert and they don't have any lions either. But if you want to head to the beach, you'll have to drive about 4 hours to Acapulco, or you can get on a plane and take a 2-hour flight to Cancun. But that may not be a good idea these days because you may encounter this woman on your plane.
Sí, amor, les voy a decir una cosa. Todos están aquí porque les vale verga el COVID. Nos vale verga el COVID y igual está todo. ¡Y se encuentran!
That's right. She has been dubbed by social media as Lady COVID. It's Mexico's very unique way to anoint one of its subjects into royalty. And as you saw on that incredibly comfortable flight, or in other words, I'm not the least bit scared about being 2 hours in a plane the size of a large living room with 150 other people with no way to open the windows. That if you make a big stink, get loud in public here in Mexico, you are given the title of lady or lord. And better yet, if you are rich, have at least 3 buttons on your shirt opened, a hairy chest, a gold chain, or a wood cross around your neck, talk like you have a potato in your mouth, and usually wear dress shoes without socks, you are called my king. But let's go back and review some of the most famous ladies and lords. If you remember Lady Profeco, who when demanding a table in a very important restaurant in the city, threatened to call her father, who happened to be the director of the most powerful regulator of restaurants, unless they gave her a table. She ultimately had the restaurant closed, and because of great smartphones, her ranting video went viral, and in a rarity here in our fine city, her father was ultimately fired. You may remember Lord Audi, who used his car to harass a cyclist driving on one of the few bicycle lanes in Mexico City, name-dropped his famous father, threw the cyclist's bikes into the bushes, started pushing a policeman, drove off with his car door still open, and yelled a very memorable phrase, "Es Mexico, wey, capta, capta." Or how about the ones that started this all, the one and only ladies of Polanco, 2 women that decided to verbally and physically attack 5 policemen in Polanco. Their biggest insult was Pinche asalariado, which just denotes their sense of position of privilege. But what provoked a huge discussion on social media was how passive the police were, who just stood there listening to their insults and let them go without any summonses. The thing is, this is not really that bad. Because of these videos, it has sparked important debate about class, safety, power, and patronage. And hopefully these videos have deterred others from repeating similar acts, like treating the people that get paid very little to protect us every day with a little bit more respect, or adhering to the rules like everyone else and not think you're different because your dad is an elected official who has power, or sharing the road with cyclists and not making a total ass out of yourself. But it is pretty funny too. And so we go to Javier Negrete, who was hanging around Pinche Gringo, to ask people what they thought about this whole lord and lady thing. Check it out.
Hi everyone, this is Mexico City, aka Chilangoland. This time we're here to ask to some people what a lady or a lord is, and why do we call them that way. So if you want to know, come with me.
Alguien que sobresalta algo y que se hace notar en un video viral.
Es la gente inconsciente que no mide sus acciones y sus reacciones y andan haciendo el oso en redes sociales.
Sí, es la gente que hace mal, que no piensa, actúa, le gana el coraje.
Sí, es alguien que, no sé, se hace viral por hacer algún acto así como de prepotencia o de nepotismo, una cosa así.
A una persona que haga un escándalo por algo que no le parezca.
Son personas que se creen con cierto estatus o poder, entonces si usted le dices, oye, no hagas eso, pero yo tengo cierta influencia, o ¿por qué tú me dices si yo traigo el carrazo? O cosas así, ¿no?
Lord, quítate que llevo prisa, porque siempre se me cruzan en el metro y así, y pues llevo mucha prisa.
Yo sería
Lord
Lady
Botella,
Tóxica.
Lord
Yo sería
Botella.
Lady Tóxica.
Lord Pizza. Bueno, Lady Pizza.
Lady 100 pesos.
El que atropelló la bici.
No me acuerdo.
que no le quiso. Lord Audi.
Es verdad, no. Recordemos que la primera es Lady de Polanco y era la que salía en Big Brother. Entonces, chequen ahí que esa gente es muy deleznable. No confíen en nadie que salga en la tele.
So, as you could see, almost no one wants to be called that way because it becomes viral, but not in a good way. So that is a lady or a lord here in Mexico City. And that is it for this week. See you next week.
Thanks, Javier. But I'm not sure you can't trust anyone you see on TV, or can you? But I have a suggestion. Let's end this lady and lord thing. Maybe call them wakala or wakalo for the men. and instead give the Lady or Lord title to those who worked so hard, defied the odds, and made such great accomplishments, such as 17-year-old Ana Paula Jimenez, who won the gold medal at the European Women's Olympiad for mathematics, or 14-year-old pianist Maria Hahnemann, who had played in prestigious concert halls in Vienna and New York, or UNAM student Liliana Navarrete, who won first place in the Sony World Photography Awards. Mexicans are doing amazingly creative things all over the world, and these are the people that should be garnering millions of views on YouTube and anointed the title Lady or Lord. And my king, or mi rey, well, I guess if they share some of their champagne with you, it's okay, they can keep their title. But let's talk about something more insane than this Lord and Lady thing. Yes, the US Electoral System. And yes, it is a system that doesn't make sense. Because in a democratic election, normally the winner wins with the most popular votes. That's usually how it works. But this was a system designed by America's forefathers, the framers of the Constitution, who Americans hold very sacred. And by the way, they all had slaves. But the system was designed for protecting the country from the will of the majority. So how it works is this, and stay with me on this. Each state votes, and the people in the state votes. Then the state legislator gets to appoint people to go to Washington, and then they vote for president, not the people. But the number of votes each state gets is determined by their 2 senators plus the amount of congressmen they have, which is determined by the state's population for a total of 538 votes. For example, California, the most populated state in the country, has 45 electoral votes, while the smallest state in the country, Wyoming, only has 3. So the problem here is that Wyoming only makes up 0.1% of the entire country's population, but receives 0.5% of the electoral vote. It's not a drastic example, but it is an example of how the system favors not only small states, but one is that is supposed to be protecting the country from an evil king. This is why states like Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania become battleground states with a rich delegate count and swing from one to the other like a mi rey after about 15 shots of mezcal. Wait, did you just touch my ass? Well, states like New York, California, and Wyoming don't really matter because they always go a certain way, either Democrat or Republican in almost every single election. So with a little over 90 days left until the US election, things are heating up, and the picture is becoming real clearer that Donald Trump has an uphill battle to win a second 4-year term. In states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which Trump won in 2016, are leaning Democrat. And what this means, and a bunch of polls taken in the last month all show a substantial lead for his opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden. In addition, in states like Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona, who also went Trump, are what they call toss-ups, which means anybody can win. And in states like Texas and Iowa, who historically, for many years, have always voted Republican, especially in Texas, this time around is only lean Republican, which means with momentum and advertising, the Democrat can actually win those states. Now, you need 270 votes to win the presidency. And many maps are showing that if the polls today correctly predict the election, Joe Biden will be the next president. So this is where it's at. But the next few months can be an absolute cliffhanger. Here's what's happening. Many state legislators, in the name of stopping voter fraud, are trying to stop people from voting, mainly Black and Latinos in urban cities. Trump has attempted to delegitimize the election already, calling for a postponement because now states are allowing people to mail in their votes. And he doesn't like this because the more people who vote usually favors Democrats. And finally, we have to talk about Rocky IV. You guys know Rocky IV, that movie when Drago defeats Apollo to take the title away. And then we have to go to the USSR to like fight it back and win it. Well, guess what? This might happen again because there's been so many allegations in the 2016 elections of Russian interference, and we have no idea if this is going to happen in 2020. So basically, anything can happen. And this election is so important because instead of it just being kind of a swing to a different party, okay, it's like Republican or Democrat and maybe some ideologies, I think most in the world are going to agree the peace of the world is at stake. And so we will be following the election on the Pinche Gringo show almost every week. So if you stay tuned so you can see what's happening up until November. So for more on this and the relationship between the US and Mexico and all of this, we have now on the show tonight Dr. Andres Martinez, Special Advisor to the President of Arizona State University and Professor at the university's Cronkite School of Journalism. He was previously Vice President at DC think tank called New America, and before that was a writer and editor on the editorial boards of the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Andres is also a native of Mexico, growing up in Chihuahua. Ay, Chihuahua, Andres. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I've never been on a show named after me, so thank you.
Well, I've never introduced a guest with that long of a biography and resume. I think you were president of the world at one point, right?
You could have just called me a pinche asalariado, you know, as Lady Polanco would put it. That's, at the end of the day, that's what I am. But it's really, I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm a big fan of everything that you're doing.
Thanks, Andres. So, well, listen, let's get right into it because I really want to talk about what I just talked about. I'm trying to explain the Electoral College to our largely a Mexican audience to really understand and frame what is going on in this election and what's happening. And what I want to first talk about is that there are swing states that are now swing states that largely voted Republican in the past, like Arizona, like Texas, right? And even Georgia, where there are a high concentration of Mexican immigrants who are now citizens in their second generation who are voting. So what does that look like in this election? And how can the Latino vote really influence this presidential election?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Listening to your explanation of the Electoral College is giving me a headache, and you did a really nice job. And it is, when you step back, it's amazingly complex and bizarre, right? I taught an opinion writing class this spring at our Cronkite school, and we had a lot of foreign students. We got a lot of mid-career journalists who come from all over the world as part of an exchange program at the State Department. They were very excited. I mean, little did we know COVID-19 was going to arrive. The course was really organized around our primary season because it was in the spring. And a lot of our students from all over the world were really confused when they realized that what they had thought was this great, you know, exemplar democracy model to the world has such a convoluted system, as you described, where it's really states that are choosing a president, not people. And that's why you'll never see a presidential candidate, as you mentioned, go to California, because if you lose California by 1 vote, or if you lose California by 5 million votes, it's the same result. You've lost all of the electoral votes of California. So that's why we end up, you know, contesting elections in recent cycles in, you know, 6 to 6, 10, 12 states. I get very nervous when people start speculating on what's going to happen in November based on polls this far out. And, you know, it's only 100 days or so away, but at the same time, you know, the races have dynamics that are ever changing. So I think there's only one poll that matters, and that's in November. But to your question, you know, I'm sitting in Arizona, and this is a state that most people assume is very red, and yet it's very competitive, and it has been more competitive than people realize. I mean, we had, you know, we've had our congressional delegation in the House is fairly split. You know, we had Don McCain and Jeff Flake as our 2 Republican senators up until recently, but they were both fairly critical of President Trump, and now we have a split there. We've had a lot of Democratic governors, but the demographics in states like Arizona and even in states like North Carolina and Iowa and places where it's less obvious have been changing dramatically because of the growth of the Latino population and other factors. I mean, in Arizona, we've also seen quite an influx of people coming in from California, sort of refugees of the high cost in California. You have a growth in the Latino population. Our freshman class at ASU, you know, just to give you a fun fact, in the last couple of years has been more than 25% Latino, because we're trying to reflect that demographic of the state. So, you know, there are a number of factors why things are looking very blue right now in polls. The Latino vote is hugely important, although I think in the last couple of election cycles, people are always slightly disappointed that there's a time lag between the growth of the Latino population and naturalized citizens and you know, U.S.-born Latinos, and they're having their weight felt at the polls, right? I mean, there's sort of some people in politics joke that the Latino vote is the future and always will be, kind of the same joke people used to make about, Brazil on the world stage. And partly that reflects the fact that the Latino vote is very heavy in states that have trended one way or the other. So you have a lot of, again, going back to the point that states choose presidents, not people. If you want the Latino vote to really weigh heavily, unfortunately, we have a lot of our compadres locked into states that have not been as competitive, namely California and Texas. But over time, one of the reasons why California went from being a fairly competitive state to being a sure lock for the Democratic Party was because the Republicans in the late 90s decided to become anti-immigrant in California, which was a very bad political calculation given what was happening demographically in their own state, and they're paying the consequences of that to this day. Now there's speculation that California could be more competitive. Obviously, Florida, there's a different dynamic there. That's a very competitive state. So right now, the key states that you can look at to assume that maybe the Latino vote will be a decisive factor. I'm sitting in one of them here in Arizona. Colorado is another very interesting one.
Of course, that's a swing state. But what I want to ask you is that what is the mobilization of Latino voters? Is because Trump was really aggressive in his rhetoric on the last election and the midterm elections with these convoys. And one of the things that's interesting is this Black Lives Matter movement seems to have been, and this is strange to say, but seems to have been great for Mexico because now Trump is really focusing on this movement to scare voters and not Mexico anymore. But to go into this question, and I have so many questions for you. You have so many things that you're doing. But is the Latino vote being mobilized? Are they going to be pushing? And do you see that this is going to make a difference specifically in Arizona, which is a huge swing state with a lot of electoral votes?
I think no efforts are being spared. I mean, I'm not personally involved in partisan politics, but I think you're right. There's no lack of motivation given what we've seen in recent years. And if you step back, one thing that's an interesting part of the equation is the role that Mexico plays in American politics. So I mean, it's kind of like this triangulation between Latinos in the U.S. and Mexico as a sort of the neighboring state, right? And obviously these two things are distinct, and then how they interact in the American political arena. And I've had arguments with friends recently about the fallout of President López Obrador's visit to Washington and him sort of cozying up to President Trump. And a lot of critics of AMLO said, "Oh, you're gonna demotivate Latinos in the state from voting. How could you say that the President Trump's been respectful to our people?" There was the famous brindis at the White House where AMLO thanked Trump for being a respectful partner and all this stuff. And I think that was I have been very critical of the López Obrador administration and the Cuarta Transformación for all sorts of reasons. But I think that was overwrought. I don't think Latinos in Arizona or Texas need to take their cues from President López Obrador about how to feel about Donald Trump. So I think that's true. And I also think that what's now the policy of Mexico over two administrations, starting with Peña Nieto, of appeasing Trump, which is it's never going to be politically popular at home, right? It's humiliating to have to, for Peña Nieto to fight Trump in the campaign, the summer of 2016, and now for AMLO to bite his tongue so many times and, cozy up to Trump, come visit in the White House and thank him. You're going to take a hit politically at home for that. But I actually think it's been a fairly reasonable strategy. Here you have a madman on your border, it's not a symmetrical relationship. The leverage and power that the U.S. has over Mexico, especially right now, is tremendous. And I think Mexico has done a fairly good job of neutralizing itself in this political campaign season. I mean, just today, President Trump issued new tariffs on Canada.
Right. And he's going and I want to talk about this, but I have like 4 more questions and I have 3 minutes. So I want to get into this because you are very involved in the media. And I know that you are someone who knows about this relationship. And what's been happening lately is that the New York Times has been really coming in here, and and Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, others writing some really incredible reports about this administration. And then there's arguments that some of the local newspapers are controlled by the president or scared, or journalists are getting killed, and so they're not writing the honest truth. So what is the U.S. media playing in being able to kind of craft what's really happening with Lopez Obrador's administration, and also with the Mexican response to the coronavirus, which of course hasn't been that great?
Yeah, I'm always happy to see coverage of Mexico in U.S. media, because one of my pet peeves is that there's never enough. The U.S. elites, whether it's media, whether it's the foreign policy elite, any elite you want, pays such little attention to Mexico. And I have a big theory as to why. But so anytime there is some concerted coverage of Mexico, that's fantastic. And I sort of roll my eyes at a lot of when I hear people in Mexico talk about the agenda of the media in the U.S., why are they doing this investigative reporting? Is the ownership of the New York Times or the Washington Post trying to do something in Mexico? And it's that's kind of silly. And I think it's sort of a naive view of U.S. media. And again, there's a great anecdote where, I remember when Salinas de Gortari left the Los Pinos, and he was sort of in, semi-exile for a while in New York, and he calls up the New York Times, and he wants to spill the beans on all the stuff that happened with the handoff between him and Cedillo. And he says, I want to meet the executive editor. And the executive editor sends, the deputy foreign editor, because he can't be bothered to meet, Salinas de Gortari. Whereas in Mexico, there's this idea, bueno fuera, right? But there's a sense in Mexico that, the executive editor of the New York Times would have an agenda versus Mexico. And sadly, again, it's a pet peeve of mine, the executive editor of the New York Times no tiene tiempo, But I think what we're seeing when you see this kind of professional reporting, the criticism of it that you might hear in Mexico, and it's not that dissimilar from the criticism you might hear from a President Trump saying, oh, this is fake news, they have an agenda. I mean, there's a similar tenor to it. It reflects, sadly, a disrespect or ignorance of how media is supposed to function in a democracy as a counterweight that holds those in power accountable, and doesn't necessarily have it. There's a somewhat inherently antagonistic relationship between media and those in power, no matter whether those in power on the right or on the left, because you are holding those accountable on behalf of the public.
Okay, last question, then I got to wrap it up. But you are the special advisor to the president of Arizona State University, and it seems like that Arizona State is taking a really special interest in Mexico, have people on the ground here, or before COVID at least, and are doing special programs to tie in the relationships. And in a minute, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and why this is important to an American university?
Well, we are now the largest single public research university in the United States. We're in a bordering state. Our president, Michael Crow, has a vision that a public university, and he rewrote our charter to reflect this, should do research that is relevant to its community. And we assume responsibility for the well-being of our community. So you cannot be in Arizona and have that charter and not be heavily engaged with it, with Mexico. We share the same environment, the same desert with Sonora. So our job, I'm one of in a larger team of people at Arizona State that are building research relationships with all sorts of universities in Sonora, with the Tec de Monterrey, with UNAM. We're trying to attract more Mexican students to come to Arizona. We're doing a lot of public programs. If you're watching and you're curious, please follow us on Twitter at ASU_MX. And you can sign up there also for our Convergence Lab newsletter. One of the things that we're doing is we're trying to have a lot of public forums, like some of the great stuff that you're doing, Dan. But it's really about trying to make that North American community more real, and have a little bit more cross-border sharing of knowledge, where researchers in Arizona, researchers in Mexico can share problems together. We were the first university in the States to have a major sustainability institute. So, alternative energy, how are we going to have enough water 50, 100 years from now? These are shared challenges. And there could be, a line drawn on a map, but that concept of a border we feel is very artificial. We're in the same neighborhood, and I think one of the great things about North America and one of the great assets of the United States, despite what some politicians have been saying of late, is that this is a great neighborhood. Canada and Mexico are fantastic neighbors to the United States. We see this as a huge asset for our state, for our country, and we want to also educate people about that and really help all of our two countries, in our case, fulfill that potential for North America.
Absolutely. Andres, I would love to talk to you more. We're running out of time. But
Thanks, man.
Pleasure to have you on the show, and definitely have you back again. Andres Martinez, special advisor to the president of Arizona State University, and a lot of other experiences that you have. Thank you so much, Andres.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
So we're entering the second month of this new normal, with Mexico continuing in an orange warning sign, which is also called a semáforo naranja, allowing restaurants to open up at 40% capacity, and this week announcing finally the lifting of a ban on music, which sounded like it was a funeral parlor before they were able to do that. So let's talk about this, and this is my favorite part of the show for two reasons, because we're going to the beautiful and wonderful Pinche Gringo commercial director and Pinche Gringo show correspondent, Laila Garcia Mora, with more information about this. But Laila, look at this. I have this beautiful, wonderful, amazing sandwich in front of me. And we got to stop doing this, because all show I'm smelling it. I'm talking politics, right? And I can't stop concentrating on the damn sandwich, Laila. I don't even know what's going on.
Dan, that's the best part of the show, the barbecue.
I know. Last week I had food in my mouth, and I was trying to do my conclusion. So whatever. I'm gonna take a bite out of this so you can start talking, and I can.
Yeah, the conversations are great, but sandwiches are even better. And tonight we have our famous, amazing, delicious, sexy Neoyorquino. This sandwich has chopped brisket, chopped barbecue ribs, and this meat gets mixed with barbecue sauce and a little bit of habanero. And all this has on the top this delicious mac and cheese sauce.
I mean,
you don't have to talk, Dan. Don't worry.
I know. I think they sent me a brisket sandwich, actually, because there's no mac and cheese sauce on it.
I'm so sorry. I promise that I'll send you another one so you can enjoy our mac and cheese sauce.
Zeus! Get Zeus out of here. What's going on over there?
He did it on purpose, I'm sure.
I can't believe it. But so while I'm eating this delicious Neoyorquino / brisket sandwich, let me ask you more about coming back to the restaurant. Now, the only restaurant I've been back to, honestly, in the last couple of weeks that this has been there, is Pinche Gringo Barbecue. And I know everybody's laughing backstage here. I can't even concentrate. There's 19 people watching, so we're okay. But going back to the restaurant, is it safe? I mean, are you gonna walk in and have little COVID gremlins running around trying to infect you and grab you into their lair? What's going on with this restaurant opening?
Dan, that's a really bad nightmare.
Don't switch it. I want to eat my sandwich and let everybody watch it while Lila talks. Go ahead, Lila.
That's a really bad nightmare, Dan. There is no COVID molecules attacking people in real size, and in Pinche Gringo either. So our locations, as I've told you in the last weeks, our locations, our staff is fully trained and is working permanently in reassuring that all of our customers are really safe once they're inside. The most important thing for our customers is that they respect the rules that our staff is pointing. They have to wear their mask. They have to wait until they get a sanitized table assigned. We all have to work together to have a great experience. And in the previous week, as you said, we didn't have music, so it was kind of weird. Now we can have not so loud music, but it's getting better every time. And the other thing is that we are going back to the games. We are going to have champions tomorrow and Saturday. And in a couple of weeks, NFL is back. So Pinche Gringo is coming back.
Well, I got to tell you something, Lila. You're going to think this is hilarious. And I want to send an incredible apology to our general manager of the warehouse, Zeus, But because they actually did bring the mac and cheese sauce, so you can pour it on the sandwich. You know, to make it better.
Now you are.
The producer didn't put it on the table, so.
Now you are a Lord of Cheese.
No.
That's the way to eat a New Yorkino. That's the way.
Fun. To eat a New Yorkino. Lila Garcia Mora, commercial director of Pinche Gringo Barbecue. Lila, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Dan.
That does it for this edition of the Pinche Gringo Show. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week, same time, same place, streaming on Facebook Live and YouTube. Have a great night and order a freaking New Yorkino. It's awesome. I love it. Have a good night, guys.
Pinche Gringo, Mexico is laughing thanks to you. We like to watch you dance salsa and listen to your bad Spanish too. We like to watch you almost die from spicy food.